Ladies and gentlemen, we are together for the next 60, 70 minutes. We're going to make this worth your while. I hope you're comfortable with Zoom. I hope you're comfortable to engage in the chat. Say hello. Tell us where you're from. Give us your name in the chat. Where, in which part of the country are you? Promote your business. Lots of people are on the Zoom session. We have over 5,000 guests and audience members joining us. Take advantage of it. Why not? You absolutely should. Let people know that you exist and let people know that you are there to do business. Also, let me know your biggest challenge. We have a great panel that I'm going to introduce you to. We are going to get the panel to help us understand how to get the right mindset, which is the beginning, the first step that we all need to take to get to the other side of tough times. But I want to start with telling you a story first. I was young and out of control and difficult with my parents. So what did they do to give me some discipline? They put me into the Navy, the Marine Navy, and I was put onto a ship. And this ship used to sail out to sea all the way to Hong Kong and back, all the way to India and back, and it was quite a place to be. Ships are built to carry different loads. Some carry oil, some carry commodities, some carry containers, some carry passengers. And sailing a ship is no different to building a business. The way you build your business needs to be determined by what your business does. Are you carrying oil? Are you carrying passengers? What does your business do? The next thing I learned is that the ship is led by the captain, and all of us are captains of our own business. We then have a crew. The crew are the people that make everything happen. And in a business, you cannot grow without a good team. What's interesting on a ship is that all the crew know exactly what they need to do, when they need to do, and how they need to do it in order to make that ship sail safely. Most importantly on a ship, when you leave a harbor, you need to know where you are sailing to. Are you sailing to Hong Kong? If so, how long will it take to get you there? Now, it happens to be a 10, 11, 12-day sailing period. So what does the smart captain do? The smart captain takes 13, 14, 15 days of food, fuel, and water. Because on that journey, the weather changes, storms appear, things go wrong, and you need to have safety. The next thing that the captain does is that the captain navigates the ship to its destination. It means that if you're clear on why you do what you do as a business owner and what you want your business to be, you can see where you are today and you can create a roadmap to get your business there. Two more things that are interesting on a ship. A ship's got two main parts to it. It's got the engines, and the engines sit underneath the ship, the deck of the ship, and the engines turn 24/7. They turn the propellers to give the ship momentum. You can either be spending your time as the captain of the ship in the engine room, making sure that the propellers are turning, or you can build engines with your team to make sure that the propellers are turning, so that you as the captain of the ship can go back up onto the bridge, and the bridge is where you sit and you stand. You have a panel of instruments in front of you. You can see all around you. And your job as the captain of the ship is to make sure that you're constantly moving in one direction, and that is to the destination. It's important because when storms come, they can set your ship off course. They can create an enormous amount of doubt. If your ship is not strongly built, it can crash in the storm. If your crew or your team is not confident in your leadership, it can crash in the storm. And what happened a year and a month ago is we hit a storm, an enormous storm. It shocked most of us as business owners, and we were all set off course. We faced the imminent failure of businesses that are essential to give us our economy, our income, to create jobs, to look after our families, of businesses that give us meaning and value in our life. We are going to get to the other side of that, despite the fact that we still have some way to go. To get there, I'm going to draw on my colleagues. And my colleagues that I have in studio with me, I'm very excited about. The first introduction is to Sifu Marco. Sifu is it's a Chinese word, right? Is a teacher or master?
Yeah, actually means teacher.
Teacher.
Or father.
Okay.
Yeah.
This man started doing Kung Fu at the age of 9. So for those of you who follow Kung Fu, just to give you a sense, Jet Li, one of the most well-known names in Kung Fu, deeply respected, remarkable, wonderful person, started at the age of 8. In effect, what I have in studio with me through Sifu Marco is one of the top Kung Fu practitioners and teachers globally. His hands and his stare are registered with the South African Defence Force and the police. With me as well, I have Dr. Ebrahim Fulham. Dr. Ebrahim Fulham was born, and as he emerged into life and took his first breath, he decided he wanted to become a veterinary scientist, a doctor, an animal keeper, lover, and health practitioner. And he started on that journey, knowing at the age of birth what he wanted to be. And circumstances took place in his life that make the COVID lockdown look like a walk in the park, that prevented him from doing it how he wanted to do it. And today, he runs an e-commerce business as well as 4 world-class veterinary clinics. We will understand his story too. Also joining me on screen is Zipo Sihle, CEO of EMZ Advisory, who was born in a small, remote KZN township, a tiny township, an unfamous township. And she was born to a mother who was a nurse. She was born into a community. She was raised by that community. And a few years ago, found herself as one of the first Black South Africans sitting, starring, and winning a Stanford MBA at one of the top 3 universities globally. Since then, from that small township in KZN, with all the odds against her, she has traveled to over 30 countries, leading, guiding, speaking, and strategizing in leadership, including the US, including China, including the Czech Republic, including Austria. And then finally, we will be joined by Adam Gottlich, Head of Behavioral Science at Standard Bank. Now, these people are scientists and they're interesting. They study human behavior and look at the economics of human behavior. And with him, we're going to discuss one of the most important things available to us all, and that's time, and how we understand time and use time to our advantage. We're also going to be borrowing from Dr. Zeus, a poet, an author, long gone, who's written some of the most fantastic kids' books in the world today. Hang Xing, a great famous Chinese general that existed in the early Han Dynasty. Kevin Van Dam, one of the top sports anglers in the competitive world of freshwater angling, who makes $10 million a year because he always wins. And a colleague of his, Mr. LeBron James, arguably the oldest top-end basketball player in the United States, who at the age of 36 still earns over $50 million a year, outperforming and beating the 22, 24, 25-year-olds who have all the strength and all the flexibility and speed that he's already lost. How is it that he stays at the top of his game? With that, when COVID came, it reminded me of a story. Mike Tyson, a famous boxer, heavyweight boxer, brutal, strong, formidable. Apparently, when he hit you, it felt like the earth shook. He was on a winning streak in the 80s and early 90s. He was not beaten He was lining up for a very big fight, and the individual he was looking to fight wasn't ready to fight yet. So what they did, the promoters organized a fight for him to keep warm, to keep fit, to keep strong. And they found a no-name boxer called Buster Douglas. And Buster Douglas was enormous. He wasn't famous. He really had not done that well. He was rated in the 20s, 30s. Mike Tyson was number 1. They agreed to fight. In the pre-fight interview, the interviewers were asking, Mike, what is your plan to beat Buster Douglas? And he said, my plan is to punch him in the mouth. And they said, but Mike, how is that a plan? And he said, because everyone has a plan until they're punched in the mouth. And he went on to say that all good plans, the moment you receive a shock, fall away and you suddenly left with only what you can do as opposed to everything you plan to do. So the fight began. Everyone bet that he would knock him out in the first round. Round 4 comes, he knocks him to the ground. Buster Douglas gets up. They continue with the fight. Round 9 comes. Buster Douglas drops Mike Tyson. The fight ends in the 12th round. Mike Tyson was defeated by a no-name, Buster Douglas. And the message to all of us here, winners get up. Mark, I'm going to come to you. First off, immediately, being hit in the mouth and hit in the face is not fun. And I'm sure with over 40 years of Kung Fu behind you, it's happened on many occasions.
It has, Pavlo. It's not the most pleasant experience. What normally would happen is fight or flight response will happen. And whether you're trained or untrained, it has an incredible amount of or effect on your nervous system.
But what does fight or flight mean? How does it happen? What happens to our bodies to make fight or flight happen in the moment you have a shock?
Well, I think you've got a choice to either run away or deal with the situation.
And what happens to your brain? Does it affect the way you see things, the way you understand things? Does it affect your ability to make a good decision as opposed to an instinctive fight or flight?
Okay, I think it does affect the brain. In my experience, through reaction, you learn to accept the fact that you get hit. There is a saying in martial arts, or that fighters would use, is that you have to take a hit in order to give a hit.
Well, that doesn't sound like a great trade, but carry on.
Not a great trade. So how it works in my mind is I would accept the situation, and then I'd reset. The reset would be a method that I would use, which I'll show you a bit later, which involves a lot of breathing and calming of the mind. And then once I'm in control of my emotions and my body, then I would react.
Because as I understand it, that when you suddenly have a shock, your body will react hormonally.
Yes.
In the readings that I've done, it says in the moment of a shock, and the shock can be a physical shock where you hit in the face. It can be an emotional shock where you suddenly face loss of something valuable and important to you. It can be the shock in the change of a state of anything that has a big, deep impact on you emotionally. My understanding is that you take this breath in, like that, I get a fright. And as I take that breath in, my body is flushed with hormones, adrenaline and cortisol. And that then tells your body to physically be ready for the fight or flight response. Is that how you've understood it?
I think there are various responses. I think when you get hit, the adrenaline and cortisol that runs in your body can be uncontrolled or out of control. And one has to find a method to control that and keep your body and mind calm. Now, in martial arts training, there's a whole routine of exercises that we do from in the physical realm through fitness and discipline and structured movement, right through to a mental side of it, where we work on your discipline and we work on your self-confidence, your courage, and your determination. And then there's an internal side, which is the part that I think would be quite interesting to share today, which is the Qigong breathing and meditation side of our system.
Okay, I'm really interested in this because what happened with COVID, when the COVID lockdown came and people suddenly, as we heard from Janine, lost 70% of their revenues, it means that you can lose your entire livelihood. All your economy's gone, everything you've worked for in life faces the threat of disappearing. And what happened, Marco, is that at that early stage, I turned around and said, this is no different to being hit in the face. It is a massive shock to the system. And it was a shock to the system because when you suddenly are facing the loss of your livelihood, it can put you into a fight or flight response. I'm really keen to understand how we can get that under control. Because when I started martial arts 25 years ago, in a year, I learned all the different strikes and punches and kicks. And then my Sifu said to me, now, for the next 50 years, you're going to learn to breathe, to get your mind under control so that you can make good decisions when you're facing a battle. And last year, all of us as business owners were put right into the front of that battle. Are you prepared to show me how to get myself under control? Can we do an exercise?
100%.
Roll your chair back. Doctor, will you join us? Thank you. Let's set this up. Move the chair out the way.
Let's get out of the way.
You're going to stand there. Doc, you're going to stand there. I'm here. We are his students. And I want all of you to please stand up and join us. Follow along. We have an opportunity here to be taught by someone with over 40 years of Kung Fu deep knowledge and experience. Sifu, where do we begin?
Thank you so much, Pavlo. Well, firstly, one has to center the brain and center the mind. And there's a physical exercise that we can do, which will do that, okay? And it's what we call jumping on our heels, which kind of stimulates the kidney meridian, which stimulates the hormonal setup in your body, and it teaches you to align your body. So I'd like you to just participate in this. Just bearing in mind that you want to keep your body nice and straight and aligned, chin in, and structure completely straight up. When we raise up onto our toes, we're breathing in, and when we drop down onto our heels, we breathe out. So we're creating like a bit of a shock system into the bottom half of our body. Another important factor is to breathe in through the nose and deep into the diaphragm. So you want to expand the diaphragm.
So the full lungs, you're using all your lungs right down. You're moving your stomach out.
You are moving the air through your lungs into your diaphragm, and you're expanding this area over here. So it's almost like blowing up a balloon, okay? The feeling of blowing up a balloon. So we're going to breathe in on our as we raise up onto our toes, and then we're going to breathe out kind of violently, get all the air out of our bodies as we slam down onto our heels.
Are you ready, Doc?
Ready?
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's do 5 repetitions. Let's give it a go. Okay, so breathe in and breathe out. Breathe in. Breathe in. And one more. And then just let your hands just float down, and you'll feel a sensation of kind of energy, bioelectric energy kind of moving through the system, and you'll feel a little bit of tingling and a little bit of...
I seriously do feel it. I can feel it. I can feel it almost moving up and washing up.
Up and washing up into your body. There's also I'd like to share with you another exercise. If you just take your hands like this and you just rub them vigorously and violently, okay, like that. And just rub it for about another 10 odd seconds, okay. But you really need to get them rubbing. And then just bring your hands out. You'll get this sensation
I can see it.
Of the shake and of energy being produced by just doing that. Okay, so the body is an electrical system. And through our breathing and through our processing of how to breathe correctly, we can generate more, we can oxygenate the body, create more electricity in the system, and that will allow the mind to lead that energy through into the body.
So in the moment of a shock, in order to get control and center your mind and to stop the panic response, to stop all the apprehension around what's happened, to make yourself present in the moment so you can make good decisions. This is an exercise routine we can use.
This is an exercise routine you can use. You can immediately go into jumping on your heels, which is a nice exercise to just get your alignment. And I'd like to share just one more exercise. It won't take too much time. So, very simply, what we're going to do is we're going to take a breath into our diaphragm. We're going to breathe in to about shoulder height. So we're going to take a 4-second breath in. I'll talk you through it. And then we're going to hold for 4 seconds. And then we're going to breathe out for 4 seconds. And then we're going to hold for 4 seconds. And we're going to do that 3 times. We've got to do that at least 3 times. So we breathe in through the nose, breathe out through the mouth. Okay. And then I want to ask you what you're feeling or what your response is like. Okay. So let's breathe in. 3, 4. Hold for 4. Breathe out for 4. Until there's no more air in the body, hold for 4. Don't breathe in. Turn the hands. Breathe in. Hold for 4 seconds. Then turn the hands. Breathe out for 4 seconds. Hold for 4 seconds. Turn. And breathe in. Hold for 4 seconds. Turn. And breathe out for 4 seconds. And then just drop your hands to the sides. What do you feel?
What do you feel, Doc?
Calm.
It's amazing.
So there's a kind of calming sensation.
It's actually amazing. It seems so simple, but I feel very, very present and very centered. I feel very alert.
Yeah.
Can I see if it really works?
100%.
Can you stand there? Okay. Let's see if this works. Okay, so give me a shock.
Okay. Oh, Jesus. Okay. That was pretty good.
Folks, it does work. It helps you recover very quickly. It helps you get back under control. It reminds me of a fascinating story. Han Xing, one of the most famous martial arts Chinese generals, was given the task of defending his dynasty, his lordship. And what he asked his troops to do was to sail across the river, climb this enormous mountain, and once at the top, rain down arrows on the opposing forces, blocking out the sunlight and the moonlight for 7 days, so he could capture that territory. On the 8th day, his lieutenants came back to him, and he looked at them and he said, "Did you take the land?" And they said, "No, General, we tried." And he looked at them and he said, "Don't try, do." He sent them back across the river. And as they started to climb the enormous mountain, they heard explosions down below. And what Han Xing did is he blew up his own ships. He gave his army no option but to win the new land, because if they failed, they could not get back to the safety of the land that he occupied. On the 8th day, they came back to him, and he said to them, "Did you take the land?" And they said to him, "Yes, General, we did." One of the most beneficial things we all have in South Africa is necessity. We do not have a choice but to make things work, but to make things right, but to succeed. Because I promise you, and I'm going to tell you something you already know, if you don't do it for yourself, nobody will do it for you. Dr. Hubert, you certainly got punched in the mouth. And out of necessity, you've had to make some big adjustments in your life. When did you know you wanted to become a vet?
So you're right, like most vets, when I was a little kid, I always knew that I wanted to work with animals. So as a little kid, I wanted to be a game ranger. And then when it came to having to choose a career, I realized that being a vet and working with game and wildlife would be a fantastic opportunity to live out my dream of working with animals. And so it was sort of at the time when I had to make a career choice, I decided that that would be the career that I would love to follow, is to be a vet. But I always knew I needed and it had to work with animals.
You know, I envy you. I envy you. There's so few people in life who know what they want to be at a young age. And the big challenge, of course, is that when you discover what you want to be, a lot of time has gone by. And I'm going to be talking to Adam about that. So you went ahead, you studied, I guess, at Honest Port at the South African Veterinary College, and you started a veterinary clinic.
Yes, I first traveled the world and then came back to South Africa, and I decided that if I wanted to settle in South Africa, I would want to be involved in a first world kind of setup. So interestingly enough, through my studies and through the first couple of years of studying, I progressively realized that I have a very specific love for people and animals and the bond between people and animals, which wasn't the same as what you have in the wildlife industry. And so my focus shifted to the small animal, the companion animal environment. And so when I came back to South Africa, I said that if I decided to stay in South Africa, I would like to create a world-class facility and practice world-class medicine. So I bought a practice in 1995, and I started practicing there, and yeah, things really picked up nicely.
That's fantastic. And did you find did you create family in South Africa?
Yeah, so I married my surgery professor's daughter, and I made.
That's how you got a distinction. Now we know the answer to good marks. I need to write that down.
I made very sure that I had my degree before I started officially dating the professor's daughter, because I needed to make sure that I could qualify as a vet. But yeah, you know, I ended up marrying a vet's daughter, and we always had aspirations for a big family, you know. So that was a very interesting, as I'll tell my story, you know, how things panned out.
Okay, so you got married, you started your veterinary clinic, you had a couple of kids, I'm guessing.
Yes.
And then of a day, you got punched in the mouth. What happened?
Sure. It was the 30th of March, 2002, and it was a day that my life changed forever. So I had the thriving, busy practice. We had 37 patients in hospital. It was a Saturday. The SABC was at the practice on that day filming a documentary, and I had a glitch with one of my staff members' wages, which wouldn't go through electronically. So I decided to physically take the wages to the staff member. So I went on my motorbike, and a taxi skipped a stop street at Yatsmats Avenue and wiped me out. And my life changed forever.
What does wipe out mean? I mean, you're alive.
So, yeah, it's, you know, the injuries were pretty severe. You know, the gentleman who drove the taxi didn't see me. He skipped the stop street, and I was already a few meters away from the taxi. I tried to swerve, I couldn't, and the bike hit the taxi. It was literally stuck in the wheel of the taxi. I flew over the roof of the taxi, landed in oncoming traffic side. My pelvis broke in 4 places. I had 2 individual discs that tore. Both hands and arms broke. This left hand broke right off, dangling on a piece of skin with the bones sticking through like that. My ribs were virtually all broken. Very bad lung contusions, very bad internal injuries. My spleen burst, and yeah, it was, you know, it was frightening. When I finally came around from the actual force of the accident, you know, I was lying on the tar, and the first thing I did was I moved my toes to establish whether my back was broken. And when I sort of could move my toes, I realized, even though I couldn't move at all because all of these fractures, I thought to myself, well, at least my back's not broken, so, you know, we can carry on.
And then the recovery process, that must have been quite hard.
It was really tough. So I had 22 operations and procedures over 10 years. I initially was hospitalized for a 3.5-month period. I was discharged in a wheelchair. I couldn't walk anymore. I walked with crutches for 8 years. And the recovery process was a very, very long process. The main thing that changed my career was the fact that my spleen burst. And they took my spleen out at the time of the accident. And there's a specific bug that dogs and cats carry in their mouths, which if you get bitten and you get this bug, you die within 24 hours.
If you don't have a spleen.
If you don't have a spleen. So initially, I was fully under the impression that I was going to be able to go back into veterinary practice And I was fully intent on going back into practice, although the first year after the accident was literally just recovering. It was learning to walk again. It was learning to use my hands and arms again. I had to have reconstruction surgeries on my arms and on the reconstruction on my pelvis. I faced death because there were 3 times where I turned at death's door. The first time was the day of the accident itself. With the injury that I sustained, 40% of people die on the road. They call it an open book pelvic fracture. So through God's grace, I didn't die on that day. And then 6 weeks later, I got a hospital infection and nearly died at that point in time. And then 3 years later, I got another hospital infection, and the 6 people that were in the same ward that I was all actually died. All of them got the same hospital bug, and all of them died. So I faced death a couple of times and had to deal with that.
So in the meantime, you are married, you have a family, you've got a veterinary practice that you can't step into. You remain committed to your first love, which is being a vet. What did you do?
It was really tough because we had 2 small little kids at home. My son was 5 months old when the accident happened, and my wife had done a PhD and had stopped working because we decided that she's going to be at home to raise the kids. And so, it was enormously difficult. The 2 vets that worked with me at the time of the accident both had plans to immigrate. Both of them very graciously put off their plans so they could help manage the practice until such time as we could get, alternative vets. And I ended up interviewing vets in hospital with, I was lying in one position because I had this external fixator in my pelvis, my both hands and arms in plasters and external apparatuses. And the PA held the phone to my ear, and I did interviews like that. So we managed to find vets to run the practice in that time period. It was a really difficult time period. We lost over 4,000 patient visits in the 3 years after the accident. So it was a rough time.
Today, you're not a vet, though. You are a vet, but you're not a vet. You've got 4 veterinary clinics.
Yes.
How do you earn your income? What do you do on a day-to-day basis if you can't step into them?
So that's very interesting. In 2003, it was about a year after the accident, I got encephalitis, and I was admitted to hospital again. And it was at this time that the physician that treated me said to me, "Listen, you're not going to be able to work as a vet anymore." And that was a really tough thing to hear at the time. But when I was hospitalized, the one day with my drip stand, I walked off down to the canteen in the Mill Park Hospital, and I bought a Sunday Times newspaper. And there was a competition sponsored by Standard Bank that was for the best business plan. And because I had been working on a medical aid for pets before the accident as an alternative to what was in the market, I thought when I came out of hospital, let me submit that. And I submitted the plan and I won the competition. And in the time period when I did this training course at the Wits Business School, I realized that one of the elements of what I was working on was actually very beneficial to the financial services industry. So I started an IT business, a voice logging company, because when I finally came to the realization that I wasn't going to be able to work as a vet anymore, and there was a process with that, I realized I would have to do something very differently. Because initially I was in a wheelchair, I also had to work in an office environment. I couldn't be exposed to animals. I couldn't walk properly. So I started this voice logging business, and with my running around in the financial services industry for the next 5 years building this business, I saw how technology and how the internet was changing the financial services sector and the banks, and I realized that this was going to happen with the rest of the world. And because my first love was veterinary, I thought, well, maybe I can set something up for the veterinary community, and that's how I started the IT company in 2008, software development company, and we started building our own software, built a fully integrated e-commerce solution, and today we've got the IT business running. We don't only supply IT products to the veterinary industry, we also have a product in the legal industry. But the e-commerce explosion has really focused us on the e-commerce side. With the animal hospitals, it's my first love, my passion. So realizing that I couldn't live out my dream the way that I wanted to by personally being involved in the lives of people and animals, I decided that what I'll try and do is create the environment for the vets who work with me to have that joy and that pleasure. So most vets don't like the admin side of things, like most business owners don't like the admin stuff, but it's really critical in terms of running a business. And so I said, let's set up that side of the business for the vets, and then they can concentrate on the veterinary, which is really the cool stuff.
An amazing story. I go back to what I said earlier. Necessity is the most powerful force of energy, and all of us in South Africa have it. So we've learned from Sifu Marco, get your mindset under control. Relax when you face a shock. We've learned the power of necessity, but more importantly, from Dr. Hubert, the importance of a vision. And it reminds me of an opportunity that I had probably about 6 years ago, 7 years ago, when I was in the US. I landed up having a dinner with a group of people, and one of them was LeBron James. LeBron James is one of the best known basketball players, professional basketball players across the world. He's worth over 7 billion rand. He earns about R1 billion a year. He turns 37 this year, and he's competing for the top spot with people who are 22, 23, 24 years of age. I managed to ask him a question, and my question to him was this: LeBron, how do you stay at the top of your game when physically you are competing with people who are way ahead of you? And he turned around and he said, I don't do it alone. He said, I took a decision that I wanted to be the top dog in this highly competitive sport. He had a clear sense of vision. And then he spends around 1.7 million rand a year on coaches. Coaches to help him jump, coaches to create flexibility, coaches to ease the stress and strains and creaks and aches in his body, coaches to improve his reaction time, coaches to improve his diet, coaches to improve his psychology. He has realized what he is good at doing, and he has drawn on the experts around him. And Zipo, if anyone knows that it takes a village to raise a child, and I've always argued, it takes everyone to build the SME economy. If it takes a village to raise a child, where you come from and where you have gotten to is an eye-opening reality of how it works. Tell me about home. Where were you born? Who were you born to? What was the world that you were born into looking like compared to where you are today?
Yes, hi. My name is Zipo Sihle, and I come all the way from Emadadeni in KwaZulu-Natal. And it's a small township, a kind of township that makes Soweto seem like the suburbs, And, that's the circumstances that I come from. And to be honest, the biggest influences in my life, when you're growing under circumstances where the world sees without, it was actually an environment where what I had was, it takes a child to raise a village. So I had a whole community of people. I had these strong women around me. I had this legacy of, generations and generations of people who've actually gone through significant struggle, and they learned tools from that. And those tools is what they gave me to be able to actually come out on the other side and be one of the individuals who, to be honest, has actually then broken the bars, broken all the ceilings, and actually made it to the other side. And here we are with me being the puzzle today, the anomaly in the system, the dots that was never supposed to be there. And here I am.
But Zipo, you know what? There's an argument that says everyone in front of us is a teacher if we're simply open to learn. What do you think you did to create that invitation for the insights that you gained from people in your life that allowed you to take those insights on board, use them, and break free from the path that you were set on to create the path that you are now on?
Absolutely. And that's a good question. And the thing about who are my teachers, right, and who are my foundations, the challenge with the world today is when you look at someone like me, they see a without, right? So you see the visible limitations. So someone would say, okay, I see your race, I see your gender, I see, whatever they see in all these things. We live in a world that says those things are a minus, right? Those things are hindrances, right? So when you're an anomaly in the system, you then go, how did you make it? And it's because I was raised in an environment where resilience was a norm, right? It was a lifetime boot camp of training. But think about who that gave me that boot camp, right? When we think about the symbolism of, where I come from, we have these strong individuals. If you think about the struggle, right? The people who carried us to get to where we are, those are the people that were my teachers. And the problem with the system today is that we see those individuals as a minus, right? So if you look at our mothers, the people who raise us in the struggle, and also their grandmothers, and even generations, those people got us here. By the way, those people raised everybody who's listening. whether they were domestic at home, right? Or whether they were your mother at home. And if you look at those people and how much perseverance that they have, and then you look at someone like me and people say, how did you make it then in the system? I'm saying I was trained by the people that raised all of us. You know, when when you were talking about how Kung Fu, you know, someone learned it at 9, right? Someone like me, I learned a lifetime of boot camp training from the best people who dealt with it for generations and generations. But not just that, I've put in my 10,000 hours. Think about someone like me in the system, how much resilience I had to build, right? How much of a thick skin I had to get. And so when someone like me then is hit by 2020, my reaction goes, I know struggle, I know difficulty. How do I build from this so that I can get to the other side? And so when you then look at someone like me, even 2020 had other struggles just beyond the pandemic. I was up in a week, right? After a week, that's how I got up, turned around my business, was able to help multinationals and clients, you know, leading big corporations be able to survive and get to the other side. Then people ask, how did you do it? And I'm saying it's because I have this lifetime of a legacy that is not acknowledged today. And let's be honest, what did the pandemic show us, right? Privilege is nothing to help you in that state. So everyone is looking and saying, where do I get help? Go to the people who know struggle. But it doesn't have to be people who know me. Think about what moment in your life did you face struggle? Take the lessons from there, use them to help you and your business get to where you need to on the other side.
And Zipo, what you've said is so on point for me because you were also a graduate of Stanford University in an MBA, where you would have been exposed to the top levels of thinking around business design, business strategy, the latest approaches, the deepest thinkers on the issues of business. And yet, in your words alone, and certainly what I witnessed at the time that COVID hit us and businesses were locked down, was that all the education in the world, the best education in the world, only became useful if you had the right mindset on how to deal with the shock of what took place. And that idea, where you get taught resilience from people who had to raise you in an environment where they themselves, without resilience, would fail, remains, in my view, one of the strongest attributes that we as South Africans all have the opportunity to grasp and possess. I have one question, though. There's something missing over here. The resilience you were taught was in a struggling, small, survivalist township environment. But how does that help you in the world of big business, multinational business, where you're working directly with CEOs? The context is so different. How do you take the lessons from that environment and place it into the most expensive boardrooms globally?
Exactly. And what I've done, literally, I've made it my art, and I had to go through my own journey of consciousness and awakening and get to a point where after hundreds and hundreds of meditation and you get to a certain level of consciousness, you then start realizing, right, that actually those tools that I got from that system are 100% applicable to where we are today in my trade, in my business every single day. I've proven now that actually those tools that help me survive, you don't need to have been in that struggle to be able to use the tools to be effective. And you can see the results, whether it's in the leaders that I've built in different parts of the world, or even just the growth in their organizations, right? Throughout resilience. And these tools go back to the fundamentals, right? We were taught things like, when you have strengths, find out what they are, and you push them and you get them to a high level of consciousness so that you become the best at what you are good at, not what someone else says you can be good at. But the other side of it, it means facing your demons. That's what happened to all of us last year. We were triggered. Some people saw their demons for the first time. It's about time everyone accepts we all have them. But if you face them and you confront them, they become your friend instead of the enemy. And there are tools behind this, right? I mean, the world is sitting in a shock and everyone is saying, how do I stay resilient going forward? And I'm saying the heart of it, you have to realize that COVID-19 was a wake-up call. I've been speaking for years saying it's not about the shock. It's about how do you prepare yourself for big disruptions, whether it's a big shock, negative, or it's a big shock, positive. That's what's happening here. The shocks are not going to stop. The shocks keep continuing. But the resilience manual, which is what I call my toolkit, is exactly what we all need to get to the other side. And one more thing, you were right, I was at Stanford. and I interacted with your Sheryl Sandbergs, your Oprahs, your Condoleezza Rices. These are individuals that, have beat the system and get to the other side. I meet them and they look at me and they say, we want to learn from you. And I'm saying, yes, because you know what? I may look young, but I've got a lifetime worth of training that unfortunately most people in the system did not get. And it's about time that all those people get to learn from us. And that for me is where the nutshell is.
Yeah, you know what? I think one of the most fundamental things that we all have to start off with around mindset is that you are who you are. You're born into an environment that you're born into. Life is not fair, but everyone is given gifts, wherever they may be. And the art is to see them, to understand them, to embrace them, and then to use them. It reminds me, it was about 2009, 2010, I was working with a client in the US, an individual by the name of Kevin Van Dam. Not the actor. Kevin Van Dam was at that stage in his mid-40s. He had big red cheeks and he was always smiling. In fact, Dr. Hubert, he looked a little bit like you, perhaps a slightly younger version. And he was always smiling. And I said to him, Kevin, you seem to be a very happy individual. And he says, I'm a happy individual. I said, Kevin, why are you happy? And he says, because I make $10 million a year. Now in rands, wow, that is a big amount of money. It's a big amount of money globally. I said, so how do you do it? And he says, Pavlo, I'm a fisherman. I go out there and I compete amongst many other people to be the best fisherman for a particular kind of fish, which we also have in South Africa, called the bass. It lives in dams and lakes. It's a freshwater fish. And I said, so how do you make $10 million if you're simply a person who competes and fishes? He says, well, in the United States, there are 39 million registered bass fishermen. And they look to the leaders in the sport to learn how to do what they do better. And he says, I win all my competitions. And that's why I make $10 million a year. And I said, but how's it possible? When you're competing at the top of your game, whoever you are, in whatever walk of life, whether it be in sports, whether it be in business, whether it be in any other setting, you're competing with people who are equally focused and equally driven. And he said, perhaps it simply means that you have to gain a few more % of focus and a few more % of knowledge and capability. And I said, Kevin, I don't understand. He said, let me show you. So what happens when you compete in this world is there's this big lake and everybody has a boat and they all stand on the boats. And when the whistle goes, over the next 2 hours, everybody sees what fish they can catch. And he or she that catches the biggest bass wins the competition. So he says, let me show you my boat. He took me to his boat and he lifted up the bonnet of his boat. And he said, look at this engine. I looked at the engine. It was big. It was shiny. He said, you know, Pavlo, and he looked around. I have the fastest boat on the circuit because if I can get to the best spot first, then I already have 1 or 2% in my favor. And then he said, look at this. Now, the way that you catch the bass is you have a fishing rod with a reel and line, and you have something called a lure, a little plastic worm or a plastic fish that the bass thinks is food. And if you cast this into the water and you pull it through the water, the bass attacks it, it's got hooks on it, and you catch the bass. And he pressed a button on the console of his boat, and these fishing tackle boxes rose from the decks. And he says, Pavlo, I carry up to 3,000 different fishing lures in every competition. My competitors, and he looked around again, carry between 300 to 600. And I said, but Kevin, surely this is too much. And he said, let me explain why I do it. He says, because on the day that there is a competition, where my skill will be counted and I will be measured. If the sun is here and the clouds are there and the wind is doing this, and I'm not at the best place with the absolute perfect lure, it could cost me $10 million a year. He says, I look at everything I can do to improve my abilities by 1 or 2% more than everyone I compete with. A strong vision with the right attitude changes the behavior of us all. It's the beginning to all our greatest successes. Zipo got to where she has got to and is going to where she is going, not by hope, not by prayer, not by chance. Zipo's vision is as strong as LeBron James, as Kevin Van Dam, and it's available to us all, but we need to make it our own. So once we have the vision, what then is the big challenge? The challenge is holding on to and making use of the most precious thing available to us all after our health, Dr. Joubert, and that is time. Adam, you've looked at time. You've thought about time. I struggle with time. I struggle to make it a real felt experience. When you're younger, you think you're bulletproof. When you're younger, you think that time will never, ever, ever run out. If you have the benefit and the fortune of being like Sifu Marco or Dr. Joubert, where you know what you want to be and what you want to create from a very early age, time is on your side. But many of us take time to figure out what it is that we want to be, what the vision of what we want to achieve and become happens. How do we develop a real relationship with time so we don't spend time spending time, but we spend our time investing it towards that vision?
Well, Pablo, I can say that you're not alone if you struggle with time. I think this is the epitome of the human condition, that we struggle with what's in the future and we have a very strong bias towards what's in the present. And really, to a large extent, this is human nature playing out. You know, our brains really haven't changed much in the last 10,000 years or so, and we still need to know where the lion is more than where the apples are. And as a result, we have this survival instinct that manifests itself, although in very different conditions, you know, to what 10,000 years ago was. But it's the same survival instinct that says I need to prioritize today because I don't know what tomorrow will hold. But given that, we need to understand two things about time. We need to understand how human beings view time, and secondly, how we view ourselves during the course of time. And the first part, how we view time, is that in general, we suffer with anything that is abstract. We like concrete things. We prefer a tangible reality over an intangible one. And as a result, something like time relative to currency feels abstract. It doesn't feel as real. You know, spending money feels a hell of a lot more real and more purposeful than spending time. But the sort of time is money is the oldest adage in business, really. So we have to understand that we have a natural bias towards discounting time because it is abstract. And knowing that, it means that we have to think very differently about time. And then we come to the second topic. It's how do we view ourselves in time? And Dr. Joubert mentioned this. He said, you know, a few of us are very lucky to know what we want to be when we're older. I wasn't one of them personally. I don't think roles for behavioral scientists even existed, you know, 5 years ago. So we need to understand that time is a concept that changes us all. And some really interesting studies have looked at this on a neuroscientific level, and we can actually see the effect of what thinking about the future does on the brain, and it's fascinating.
What does it do? I need to hear this because there was a period, you know, and I think about this a lot, Adam, and no doubt, I hope that what I'm sharing is felt by all of us at some point in time. Otherwise, I'm really going to become insecure. But there was a time in my very early 30s where I promise you, I worked hard. I applied myself. I was focused. I was committed. I was doing everything right. I was gaining success. And I thought that that was enough. I thought that was enough to give me what I thought I wanted. And only 10 years on did I realize that all of that time was time spent attempting to achieve success. Because 10 years on, I had a moment of absolute clarity around what I wanted to be and what I wanted to do in the world today in service of the people I care for most, which are business owners. And from that moment on, Adam, my time was invested, not spent. It changed my behavior, it changed everything. And I still live with a regret today that that never happened to me earlier. It's that issue that I would love to understand. In your view, how do we make sense of it? How do we get the me at 43 to become the me at 33?
An interesting question. And I think this speaks to possibly one of my favorite ever studies in behavioral science. It comes from a journal called Neuroimage. And basically, it's a meta-analytic review of over 85 studies of fMRIs. And in these studies, they were looking at something very specific. They wanted to know how we view ourselves and which areas of the brain are involved. So what they found was that when we think about ourselves, an area of the brain called your medial prefrontal cortex lights up. Lots of activation, lots of movement. So this is when we're thinking about ourselves. But now, when we think about others, less activation. It's not as bright on the fMRI. And when we think about other people who we have, very little in common with, even lower levels of activation. Now, the interesting thing was that they started to ask people to think about yourself in the future. And then they looked at the brain scans. And they found that the activation in the medial prefrontal cortex, when you think about yourself in the future, is the same as thinking about a stranger. It means that our future selves are complete strangers to us in the present. So really, what exists here is a future gap. And I think, Pablo, you're an example of a futurist. I think you've been able to reconcile who you want to be with who you are now. But I think that's a gap that exists for a lot of people that needs to be reconciled if we're going to make the most of today for tomorrow's utility.
Yeah.
So given that we have a gap between who we are today and who we're going to be in the future, we need to actively nudge ourselves every day to start thinking about the future and create these future growth mindsets. And I think this is exactly what Zipo was talking about. This concept of a growth mindset, of seeing yourself as malleable, as seeing yourself as someone who, through effort, can attain mastery. But in order to do so, something I would suggest, it's been sort of empirically validated through a number of articles and practical advice from behavioral scientists, is that list your interests. List what you're interested in. And at least once a week, go and Google the future of. So if you're interested in technology, go and look at the future of technology. In this way, you start to think about the future far more regularly, because in recent surveys done with Americans and with Europeans and with Africans across the globe, people across the globe, they found that we only think about the future about 1 to 2 times per week. But we think about our daily sort of struggles, family and friends, every single day, multiple times a day. So in order to think about the future, we need to be purposeful and we need to nudge ourselves daily.
That is a fantastic, fantastic insight and story. It's no different to the captain of the ship thinking about sailing in the moment as about sailing to the destination. If you don't have that destination clearly set, if you don't have a vision of what you want to be and where you want to get to and what kind of business you want to operate and build, it makes everyday activity a wasteful spend of time as opposed to an investment into that future. I want to start concluding around our event today. I see there are a number of questions that have come across the screen A lot of them have to do with funding issues. Why won't the bank fund me? I'm going to address that and I'm going to talk to it because I've asked the question about banks for years and years and years. But before we do, I want to draw on the wisdom of Dr. Zeus. He wrote a fantastic book. And the fantastic book is called, Oh, the Places You Will Go. It's the journey of a person, be it a youngster, a girl, a boy, a kid, an adult, someone who is succeeding, someone who is looking to succeed, someone who has succeeded. It's a story about life. And I consider it to be one of the most valuable books that empowered me to break whatever it was that used to hold me back, to become whatever it is that I want to become, if I commit to the journey that I'm going to share with you. At some point, the character in the book has been searching and searching and searching to find purpose and meaning. They've been searching and searching and searching to find their success. They've been searching and searching and searching to find the answer to what makes a successful life. And the book reads as follows. It says, you can get so confused that you start into race down long wiggly roads at breaknecking pace and grind on for miles across weirdish wild space, headed I fear towards a most useless place, the waiting place, for people just waiting for a train to go, or a bus to come, or a plane to go, or the mail to come, or the rain to go, or the phone to ring, or the snow to snow, or the waiting around for a yes or a no, or waiting for their hair to grow. I've been waiting. Everyone is just waiting for the fish to bite, or waiting for the wind to fly a kite, or waiting around for Friday night, or waiting, perhaps, for their Uncle Jake, or a pot to boil, or a better break, or a string of pearls, or a pair of pants, or a wig of curls, or another chance. Everyone is just waiting. No, that's not you. Somehow you'll escape all that waiting and staying. You'll find the bright places where boom bands are playing. A lot of us don't appreciate it. A lot of us don't even realize we are doing it. We're waiting. We're waiting for things to be better. We're waiting for an opportunity to come. We are waiting for COVID to go or grow. We're waiting for someone to say yes or no. And the only reason we're waiting is because we're uncertain about why we are doing what we are doing. Center your mind. Empty the noise. Find something that will give you meaning and value. Define it, shape it, think about it daily. Then have the courage to break the chains that hold you back, much like Zipo did, to pursue it at all odds and at all costs. There are a number of questions that have come through, and one of the main questions coming through is, why would the bank not fund me? I want to answer it, if I may, on behalf of the bank. I've been turned down for funding often. It's a horrible feeling. It makes you feel that the world is unfair. It makes you self-doubt yourself, wondering if you're good enough. But in actual fact, if you understand how the mechanics of funding works, it suddenly makes you realize that you're being profoundly selfish. You see, banks exist to provide services to businesses, and they have freedom within their own frameworks. Banks have shareholders, banks have investors, banks have responsibilities to remain stable and safe in order to keep society operating and functioning. And this occurs right across the world. I learned early on that a bank's job is not to fund me. It's actually my job to create a business that is fundable. There's a way to create a business that a bank wants to fund. And when you do that, there's no bank out there that would say, no, we don't want to fund you. In fact, they began throwing money at you. Please take the money we can offer you. Please invest it. Please grow it. Because as a bank, we offer money in the hope that you can grow the money so we can give a return to our investors and shareholders and use that money to on-lend to other businesses out there. We will talk, especially in event number 2, 3, and 4, how to build a business that is fundable, because it's our responsibility to make sure that what we present to any funder, be it a bank, be it a brother, uncle, aunt, cousin, friend, or colleague, in looking for funding, that we will be able to return the promise that we make in taking that funding on. Many of us are not taught how to build businesses. And many of us who are taught how to build businesses by the best business schools in the world land up failing at building businesses. It is very much a practical exercise. And I promise you, and here's my commitment to you, that with the right mindset, at the end of this event, when we move into event number 2, 3, and 4, we will talk about how to reset your business to become relevant, to become special, to become desired, to become meaningful for the customers that you serve. How to then rebuild it so that you are not the reason your business exists, that it exists because you have created something with people that customers and clients value. And then finally, in event number 4, we will talk to how you get the funding you need to really make that business grow on the back of a good mindset in a relevant business, built beautifully, entirely orientated around growth. I really do hope you will join me at the next event. It occurs on the 23rd of June. All of you will be receiving an email thanking you for your time that hopefully you find valuably invested with us today. Again, go out there, practice the exercises that Sifu Marco has shared with us. Think about how to turn crisis into opportunity, as we've learned from Dr. Joubert, and then take from Zipo the idea that the world you're born into does not determine the world that you will create for yourself in the future. Let's hold on to the respect that time runs out that Adam shared with us. A life of waiting for something to happen makes nothing happen. Your truth will be found in your action. We shall see you at the next event.